Hello and welcome to the 741 channel. Thank you for stopping by. Today we're going to take a look at assembling and erecting this 9-foot arched pergola from Hampton Bay that my wife and I bought at Home Depot, and we're going to put it on my deck that's back there behind me. Now originally I wanted to construct my own custom pergola for the deck, made out of wood, but just not going to have the time for that this summer, and my wife's sick of waiting around for me. So I figured we'd buy this and put it up. It'd be a lot quicker and easier. It ought to last a few years until I can find some time to build the pergola that I really want to build, and then we can move this and use it in the yard somewhere. Anyway, let's get started. I'm going to open up the box. We'll see what we have in here. Okay, so there's a look at the contents of the box before I start ripping everything out of there. Well, except for the instruction manual and the hardware pack. So in addition to the hardware pack and the manual, you can see there was a sheet included with the manual that mentions that there is an interactive 3D app available to help with assembly. I'm going to go grab my phone and download that app. I might as well use it while I put this thing together. Okay, so as you can see, I've got the app installed on my phone. This happens to be a Google Pixel 2 Android phone, but this should work on an iPhone or other Android phone. So I'll just tap in here and search for my product. I'm going to just search by the brand name. And it looks like I didn't even get very far, and it kind of popped up as the first option. So we'll just click on that. And we don't need to see the warranty information, hopefully not ever. Okay, so there's a look at the app, and it looks like it's a step-by-step guide. It says it takes about 3 hours, needs 2 people, and is 25 steps. So I guess we'll just push start on this and see what happens. Looks like it's going to download. I am on my Wi-Fi connection, so that's good. Okay, so it looks like the first step, it shows what tools we need and the parts list that's included here. So we can view all that if we want, or skip to the next step. So just for the heck of it, I'm going to view it, at least the tools here. It looks like we need an Allen wrench, scissors, Phillips head, and another Allen wrench. It looks like the 2 Allen wrenches are included, as they usually are with stuff like this. And then over here we can look at the parts list, and you can see all the items that are required, easily accessible there. If you'd rather go the traditional route and use the paper manual, you can see that the one included is pretty much your standard manual for something like this. Wireframe diagrams and short paragraphs explaining what needs to happen. So we'll keep this out as a reference, but I think for the heck of it, I'm going to try that app and see how it works as I go through the process here.
This procedure will show you how to assemble your arched pergola.
Okay, so as you can see, we're at the first step here, and the phone is telling us exactly what we need to do. There's a 3D model here now that we can kind of look at and rotate and all kinds of stuff. So let's go to the next step and see what we got to do.
For this assembly, you will need the provided hex wrenches, FF, and a pair of scissors.
Okay, so we're at the first step in the app, and I've actually got the parts ready to go. I'm going to replay the audio just so you guys can hear what's going on.
Insert the right connector bar A into the left connector bar B and secure with 4 M6X15 combination bolts AA. Repeat for the other set of connector bars. Note, fully tighten all bolts using the hex wrench FF.
Okay, so as you can see, I've got the left and right connector bars here ready to go, just like it says in the app. These things were packed in these fabric sleeves to keep them from getting scratched and whatnot. And then down here you can see I've got the hardware ready to go. I've got the metric 6 screws, and I've got the Allen wrench supplied with the kit. So let's get this thing together.
Insert the short shade rods, F, into the top slots of the fabric shade, J, opposite of the handle loop.
So at this point in the video, it's going to look like I skipped ahead a little bit on you guys, but the reason that I'm showing you this now is that I had the sunshade here upside down when I first started working on this. The thing to note is that these channels that the crossbars go into should face up. Now for the last few segments I've actually had it facing down, and that's what you'll see as we progress through the video. But like I said, it should be oriented so that these are facing up. As you can see, I've got the shade spread out on the deck here. I've got the shade rods here ready to go, and I've identified that this is the handle end right here. So I'm going to put these rods in the far end of the shade back there.
Attach the short shade rods F to the front connector bar A and B without the magnet plate using 4 M6X35 combination bolts CC. Pull out the elastic ribbons on the 2 fabric slot ends and loop over the bar ends as shown. Note, do not tighten the bolts at this step.
So it looks like the next step is to attach the 2 rods that we just inserted into the fabric shade to that cross member back there. There are 4 holes, 1 on the right and 2 in the middle and 1 on the left, that we'll be inserting these bolts through. And that's the crossbar that doesn't have the magnetic plate in the middle. One thing that may not have been clear in the app is that the rod that was inserted into the shade has sort of a bow to it. And when installing it to the crossbar, you want to make sure that that bow matches the bow of the crossbar. So I've got all the bolts finger tight in there as the instructions indicated. And now on either end here, I'm just going to pull out this loop and wrap it around the bar.
Insert 2 end tips L into the side top bar D and secure with 1 M6X15 combination bolt AA at each end. Repeat this step for the other side top bar. Note, do not tighten the bolts at this step.
So as you can see, I've got the side rail here ready to go. This was labeled D, and I've got one of the end tips labeled L ready to go. I'm just going to put this in the end of the D bar like this, with the scalloped end facing down or on the same side as this bracket. So we'll slide that in, and then I'm just going to put in the M615 screws, and we're just going to finger tighten these for now as instructed. So now I'll repeat the process for the other end tip on the other end of this bar, and then repeat the whole process for the second side bar.
With a pair of scissors, cut and remove the cable tie securing the plastic wheels for each bar. Pull the wheels out as shown.
So the next step is to pull these wheels out so they're accessible, and then cut the zip tie. And you can kind of see the idea here. These should all kind of hang out and down, and there's sort of a plastic nub that sits inside that track and rides along that rail. So now that those are out and accessible, I'll cut the zip tie. Okay, so after much fiddling and even some swearing, I think I've got all of these extended out the way that the instructions want them to be. It seems like once you remove the zip ties from them, their natural state is to want to fall back in the rail, especially with the rail oriented like this. The reason I'm doing this upside down is so you guys can kind of see what's going on. When you do this yourself, you may want to try and orient the rail and kind of pull them out from the bottom so that they hang down. But you can see I've got the cut pieces of zip tie in there to keep them from falling back in until we can get to the next step.
Insert 2 inner tips S into the lengthways bar C and secure with 1 M6X15 combination bolt AA at each end. Repeat this step for the other 3 lengthways bars. Note, use the holes to the inside as shown. Do not tighten the bolts at this step.
So as you can see, I've got the lengthways bar C and I've got the tip S. We're going to put that in. And we're just going to put a screw finger tight in the top, and then I'm going to repeat the process for the remaining crossbars and end tips.
Insert 2 center tips Q into the center lengthways bar E and secure only the end opposite of the wheels with 1 M6X15 combination bolt AA. Note, use the hole to the inside as shown. Do not tighten the bolt at this step.
So as you can see, I've got all the C bars assembled with their end tips, and now we're going to do the E bar, which is similar to the C bar, but it just has wheels and a groove in it.
With a pair of scissors, cut and remove the cable tie securing the plastic wheels. Pull the wheels out as shown.
So just like before, this is probably going to be easier said than done, but what we'll try and do this time is get this flipped over and get the wheels kind of pulled out before I cut that zip tie. Okay, so you can see that that was much easier when we did it in this orientation. So I'm going to let this hang off the edge of the deck here, just so that the wheels won't retract back in.
Attach the center lengthways bar E to the connector bar assembly A and B that doesn't have the magnet plate using 1 M6X80 combination bolt DD. Do not tighten the bolts at this step. Note, the bolts on the A and B connector bar assembly are oriented towards the inside as shown by the arrows. Also note the hole location in the center lengthways bar as shown by the arrow.
So as you can see, I've got everything oriented as instructed. The center bar E is resting on top of the crossbar assembly A and B, pointed so that it extends along the spine of the pergola. One thing to note about the orientation is that on the center bar E there's a threaded insert. It's gold colored and right about there above where the wheels are hanging down and just kind of in front of that label. And the important thing to note is that that threaded insert is towards the end of the crossbar that we're attaching. The other end of the E bar does not have the threaded insert on top.
Using AM6X80 combination bolt DD, connect the other end of the center lengthways bar E to the connector bar A and B with the magnet plate. Do not tighten the bolts at this step. Note, the magnet plate is oriented to the inside as shown by the arrow.
Okay, as you can see, I've got this crossbar here. This is the one with the magnet plate on it. And the magnet plate is right here under the crossbar and facing in. So now we'll just attach this with one of these long screws and leave it finger tight.
Attach 4 lengthways bars C to the assembled connector bars A and B using 2 combination bolts DD for each one. Note, do not tighten the bolts at this step.
Next up, I'm going to attach the rest of the bars to the front and back crossbars. Now you may be able to see that there are threaded inserts in the crossbars where these things will line up to. The 4 inner locations have threaded inserts that are visible in the crossbars. The 2 locations on either end of the crossbars do have threaded inserts, but they're inside the tip and not sticking proud of the crossbars like the others are.
Attach 2 side top bars D to the assembled connector bars A and B using 2 M6X80 bolts DD for each one. Note the hole locations in the side top bars are opposite from the magnetic plate. Note the gap between the end tip L and the A-B connector bar. Note, fully tighten all bolts from this step and previous steps using the hex wrench FF.
Next up, I'm going to assemble the side bars, the ones labeled D, to the ends of the top frame here. And we're going to just use one of the long bolts through each end of the crossbar. Now, one thing to note about orientation is that this crossbar, just like the center one, has a threaded insert in it, and that should be towards the back crossbar or the one without the magnetic plate. So you can see there's a flat plate on either end of this D bar that line up to some holes in the crossbar. We're not going to put any bolts through those just yet. We're going to use one bolt through the center of the D bar just like we've done on the other bars. And once that's attached, I can go through and tighten up all of the bolts that were previously just finger tightened.
Attach only the middle of the protective cover I to the center lengthways bar E using 2 M6X15 combination bolts AA. Note, fully tighten all bolts using the hex wrench FF.
So the next step is to attach this fabric cover over the top of the pergola rails. Now you may be able to see over there in the center of the cover there are 2 grommet holes, and we're supposed to put 2 bolts through. But the problem is, and you may be able to see back there, there's only one threaded insert in that center crossbar. There should be another threaded insert in the end that's on that bar, but there's not. There are threaded inserts on the 2 end bars here, you can see, that will accept the bolts for the shade cover, but not in the center. What I did notice is that the front of the pergola has these tips on it on either end with the threaded insert in them, and I don't think they're going to be needed for anything in the front. So I'm going to take one of the ones off of there and swap it with this one over here in the center so that we have a grommet hole. Now I don't think it was in the previous instructions to put one of the tips with a grommet on it back there, but I may have missed it. I'll have to go back and take a look.
Attach the post base plate R to the post H using 2 M6X15 combination bolts AA. Repeat for the other 3 posts. Note, fully tighten all bolts using the hex wrench FF.
Next up, we're going to attach this base plate here to the bottom of each of the posts, and you can see that it just mounts to the post like that. There's 2 short M615 screws that are going to hold it in place. Now, worth noting is that the bottom end of the post is flat and has this center bracket in it. The top of the post is sort of L-shaped.
Lift the assembled roof up at an angle and place 2 post assemblies in place as shown. Note, use a step ladder or helper to support the parts shown in this step. Attach the posts to the assembled structure using 3 M6X80 combination bolts DD and 3 M6X15 combination bolts AA as shown for each side. Note, do not tighten the bolts at this step.
Okay, so as you can see, I've got the 2 back legs on, Now I used my wife to help me lift this up and kind of hold it while I got the legs in place. Now for now I'm going to leave it like it is, and I'm going to go on to the next step, which is to install the cross braces in the shade while the thing is sort of at an angle and at a reasonable level to reach.
Insert a long shade rod G into the slot at the end of the fabric shade J through the middle rolling wheel E1 and into the remaining slot of the fabric shade. Align the wheels with the rod end and pull the elastic ribbons over the wheels as shown. Secure the rod to the plastic wheels with an M6X18 countersunk bolt BB on each end. Note, do not tighten the bolts at this step.
As you can see here, I've got the first, what I'll call long curtain rod in place. And you can see that I've kind of fished it through the loop that's in the fabric and then got it through the center slide wheel that was in the middle. And then I brought the two side ones over, put the screws in, and then wrapped this fabric thing around.
Repeat for the remaining 3 long shade rods G. Note, the last wheel in the middle will be the steel rolling wheel E2. Note, when finished, fully tighten all bolts using the hex wrench FF. Finish attaching the protective cover I to the side top bars D using 4 M6X15 combination bolts AA. Note, fully tighten all bolts using the hex wrench FF.
So the next step is to attach the protective cover to the top of the pergola on the two sides.
Lift the structure and attach the other 2 posts H in the same way. Note, use a step ladder or helper for support. Note, fully tighten all post bolts using the hex wrench FF. Ensure all connections are secure before use. Use the provided ground spikes E if you are installing the pergola on the ground instead of a patio or deck.
Okay, so as you can see, the pergola is done. Well, except for anchoring it down on the deck. I want to kind of move it around and square things up a little bit. And then what I'll do is put some screws through the holes in the bottom of the feet plate there and keep it anchored to the deck. As it is now, with the Trex there and everything, this thing is kind of slidey, and I think a good gust of wind will end up taking it away.
Congratulations! This concludes the assembly of your arched pergola.
Okay, so I'll talk about a few things related to the final few stages of the assembly. Now, I didn't turn the camera on for those because I kind of struggled with it a little bit. Now, if you guys remember, I had the thing tipped over off the end of my deck, and when I tried to lift it up to put the front posts on, I put some of the weight on those back legs, and I shouldn't have done that because they started to bend. So I ended up having to put it down, and I went and got my wife to help me. And the thing is heavy. It's not overly heavy for my wife and I, but the problem with us is that we're both kind of short. We're both about 5'5", 5'6", thereabouts. And once we were able to lift it, we couldn't get it high enough over our heads to kind of lift everything up. So then when we started to put the front legs under, everything got a little sketchy and kind of slidey because of the powder coat on here and everything, but we managed to get it without dropping it, but it got kind of close at one point. Now, another thing I want to mention is that especially with the leg posts here, the threaded inserts that are in there to accept the bolts to hold everything together are not very strong. And I did strip out a couple of the screws when I tightened them, and I didn't really overly tighten them. I'm pretty mechanically inclined, and I kind of know when to stop with bolts and things like that. This is just very thin, very cheap metal. And in some cases, I don't think there's even inserts in there. I think it's just the sheet metal is tapped. And that's really not a good recipe. So consequently, this thing is just kind of sketchy up here. Now, once I screw it down to the deck with the feet, I think that'll kind of stabilize it a bit. But even still, it's really kind of wobbly. So the upshot of that is that this thing will serve the purpose, at least for this summer. It might last into next summer too, but I just have a feeling that a real strong storm or a big gust of wind is going to do some damage to this thing. Its overall weight versus the strength of the material just doesn't seem all that well engineered. I think it's right on the edge. That fabric canopy is probably going to last a season or two, and I expected that. It'll have to be replaced with either a part from them, or my wife will have to make something or whatever. We kind of banked on that, but I thought the structure of it would be a little more stable than what it is. Okay, so would I buy this thing again? Absolutely not. Not for the price that I paid for it anyway. I did get a little bit of a deal, sort of an end-of-season discount sort of thing, but it still was kind of overpriced for what it is. Now, one other thing I want to mention is that the pergola came with some spikes that you can use to put it in the ground if you've got this thing on the ground. Now, I wouldn't trust those things at all to hold this. There's a lot of weight, and those are thin little cheap Chinesium metal spikes, and they're not going to hold anything. They're not even going to stay in the ground. So if you're going to put this thing directly on the ground, you're going to want to find a better way to anchor it. So I guess that's going to just about do it for the Hampton Bay arched pergola. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful, please give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to leave a comment or subscribe, feel free to do that as well. And if you'd like to learn more about this pergola, I'll leave a product link to Home Depot's webpage in the description below. Thanks for watching.
Congratulations! This concludes the assembly of your arched pergola.